What if your phone is still listening, connecting, and potentially being accessed, even when you think it is completely powered down? Behind the glass screen of every modern smartphone lies a fundamental division of structural labor. When users swipe, tap, or launch an app, they are interacting directly with the application processor, the highly visible brain that runs Android or iOS. Yet sharing the same physical motherboard is a completely separate, hidden computer known as the baseband processor or cellular modem. This tiny silicon die does not rely on the phone's main operating system. It is an entirely independent computing platform, engineered with its own dedicated processing cores, separate RAM, its own flash storage, and a specialized real-time operating system. While Android or iOS manages the user interface, the baseband processor autonomously handles the high-speed task of radio communication. Every voice call, text message, and gigabyte of mobile data depends entirely on this isolated subsystem. The two processors communicate over a specialized internal bus and shared memory mailboxes, allowing them to exchange messages while keeping their operations strictly partitioned. This division of labor means the main processor has no direct window into the baseband's internal processes. While the screen displays a single seamless device, the handset actually houses two distinct computers working side by side, one fully visible to the user, and another executing millions of lines of proprietary, closed-source code that is almost impossible to monitor or control. Pressing the power button and watching the screen go black creates the illusion of complete shutdown. On a hardware level, however, the cellular modem does not fully turn off. Instead, it drops into a deep sleep state, drawing a tiny, continuous stream of electricity from a dedicated radio power rail, consuming less than 500 microwatts. This low power state is a deliberate design compromise driven by regulatory mandates. Under FCCE 911 rules, any mobile phone must be capable of routing an emergency call at any moment, even when the user believes the device is powered down. To satisfy this requirement, the baseband processor maintains a minimal radio presence. According to 3GPP specifications, the modem must execute a periodic network registration heartbeat, typically every 10 to 30 seconds. This background signal keeps the subscriber attached to the local cellular network. It also maintains a quiet listening window for over-the-air carrier updates, allowing network operators to silently push firmware patches directly to the chip. Because this real-time operating system runs on its own isolated core, it executes these tasks entirely outside the user's control. A visible shutdown simply mutes the main screen, leaving the quiet radio layer awake and listening. The physical separation that isolates the cellular modem also makes it a highly dangerous blind spot. Because this secondary computer sits directly between the cell tower and the main processor, it controls the gateway for every incoming and outgoing transmission. If an attacker compromises the baseband firmware, they bypass the entire suite of security defenses built into the main operating system. Security researchers have repeatedly demonstrated that this underlying code has a documented history of vulnerabilities. Modern mobile operating systems employ advanced sandboxing and strict access controls, but baseband firmware often relies on legacy architecture written in memory-unsafe languages. Exploiting a bug in this radio layer requires absolutely no action from the device owner. A malicious signal sent from a rogue base station or a malformed data packet delivered over the network can trigger a buffer overflow directly in the modem's memory, executing unauthorized code before the phone's security systems can intervene. Once compromised, the consequences are severe. An attacker can gain low-level remote access to the hardware, enabling silent surveillance, real-time location tracking, and the direct interception of voice calls and text messages. Because the main application processor remains completely unaware of the malicious activity occurring on the coprocessor next to it, the phone's user interface will display no signs of intrusion. There are no unexpected warning prompts, no security alerts, and no visible indicators of battery drain. The exploit runs silently in the background, operating on an independent chip that the phone's owner can neither monitor, audit, nor control. 3 global companies design and manufacture almost every cellular modem in use today: Qualcomm, MediaTek, and Samsung. These chipmakers write the proprietary, closed-source, real-time operating systems that govern the radio hardware. Because this code is proprietary, it is cryptographically signed using the manufacturer's private keys. This secure boot mechanism ensures that only firmware carrying a valid signature can execute on the baseband processor. But it also establishes a strict boundary of ownership. The person who bought the handset is entirely locked out of its most fundamental communication chip. Below the chipmakers, cellular carriers exert a second layer of quiet authority. When a phone connects to a network, the modem reads a dedicated, carrier-specific non-volatile memory partition. This storage dictates how the modem behaves, which frequencies it prioritizes, and even enables silent diagnostic features. When updates are released, they do not go through standard app stores. Instead, carriers deliver signed firmware directly to the modem over the cellular control channel. These over-the-air updates occur silently in the background, bypassing user confirmation, visible progress bars, and direct consent. This direct, unmonitored channel of access makes the baseband processor a point of significant interest for corporate and state actors seeking covert access. Because the firmware is completely opaque and signed by a chain of custody that bypasses the user, the device owner has no way to audit what code is running on their radio chip. It reveals a stark reality of modern consumer technology. Purchasing a smartphone does not grant complete ownership. The physical device may belong to the user, but the computer that manages the radio remains under the control of the institutions that built it and the networks that run it. Imagine a journalist working in a hostile region. To protect their sources, they hold down the power button, watching the screen fade to black. They believe they have vanished from the grid. Yet miles away, a local cell tower continues to register a brief, silent registration handshake from the device resting in their pocket. Or consider an activist who turns off location services only for a rogue transmitter to capture their coordinates directly from the cellular modem, completely bypassing every software permission on the active operating system. These are not hypothetical fears. Privacy-conscious users, journalists, activists, and everyday phone owners are all exposed to the same invisible network. Security researchers have documented real-world tracking cases where attackers manipulated this radio layer to conduct stealthy surveillance. While manufacturers eventually patch several of these high-profile exploits, the underlying hardware gap remains. For anyone relying on their phone to keep them safe, the word "off" represents a promise of privacy that the physical hardware does not keep. Many turn to airplane mode to disconnect, but this is merely a software flag instructing the operating system to ignore the modem. The radio chip itself stays energized in a low power state, listening for emergency paging. Physical options like Faraday bags block radio signals temporarily, but their seams degrade over time, and they render the phone entirely unusable. Removing a physical SIM card stops identity tracking, yet the modem still scans for local networks to satisfy regulatory rules. On newer devices, integrated eSIMs complicate this further, allowing carriers to silently push profiles over the air. While open source alternatives like the PinePhone feature hardware kill switches, mainstream smartphones offer no such control. For the average user, true isolation remains almost impossible. Ultimately, the question isn't who is watching, but who actually controls the devices in our pockets. As technology integrates deeper into our lives, the illusion of ownership fades. Until we demand open hardware, we remain guests on our own devices. What do you think? Share your thoughts below.